Dr. Savage, we're back for another episode of the TPE Blueprint. I'm happy we're doing this. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Just finished my fourth TPE about 4 weeks ago because I had to top it off, as it were.
Well, topping it off, and I think and I'm so curious to dive into TPE as how you do it, and how the
Sure.
procedures and the process, and we'll talk about. I'm just gonna say it now. Like I will definitely be visiting you to do some of those for myself, and I'm just selfishly curious, and I want to share that here later on.
We're going to have a good talk today because
Yeah.
we're going to talk about toxins. We're going to talk about what toxins are, because what does that word mean? I mean, what does it do? Why should you be concerned by that word? And what is it, how many things does that word represent, which is hundreds of thousands, by the way.
Everything.
Um,
Yeah.
and what's that mean? How's that going to impact your health? And what do we know and what do we just assume?
And that's what we started off. Yeah, in the previous episode, we were talking about really the history, right? The
Yeah,
history of toxins, and it wasn't always like this, but the 50s was kind of this turning point that
yeah,
the world saw
yeah,
and hasn't stopped. It's been just multiplying. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, like we talked before, it's the Industrial Revolution when that all started up, and then the cities became toxic. But then, then it just kept growing and growing. The industry grew, the cars grew, the factories grew, the consumer need for living through better chemistry grew,
Mm.
and that ends up being a very oxymoron when you start, because you're not living through chemistry anymore. We're dying in chemistry.
Yeah. Well, and that's where, my head goes to, so how does this affect us as humans, this
Yeah.
this toxin load? Because, you were mentioning on this actually just right before we started recording how there's history of people that aren't so affected because of the way they live or where they live.
There are still pockets around the planet that have people who are not very toxic, but though they are shrinking quickly,
Hmm.
because these toxins is kind of like smoking in a room. If you get a room filled with smoke, eventually it's going to get into every other room. Eventually it's going to get into the attic and into the floor and then start getting into the outside world. It doesn't stay in one place, and it doesn't stay in its own little ecosystem. It just spreads. And it doesn't matter which toxin we're talking about, whether we're talking about heavy metals or mycotoxins or any of the industrial chemicals, any of these things, they just start becoming ubiquitous everywhere at the same time.
Hmm. And we'll talk in this episode too, as we mentioned before, our homes are the most toxic places. I think you said, was it
It's the
five?
most dangerous. One of the most dangerous places that you can be is your own home if
Yeah.
you haven't done what you needed to make it toxic proof,
Yeah.
which you can
Yeah.
do, and it's not hard. We're going to be going through those as well.
Definitely. Yeah. So let's talk about and how this is affecting us as humans, our bodies, and how this leads to different conditions that we see popping up. The rises in cancer, there's autoimmune disease, Alzheimer's. Yeah, I guess like that connection between toxins and us. That's where I want to really focus on here.
Sure. It's really a four-step process. Once you have toxins in your system, they cause inflammation. That's the body's trying to attack the toxin. It's trying to cure what the toxin is damaging. It's trying to get it out of the way. So inflammation is the way the body rallies the troops to come fight this invader, because that's what they're all invaders.
Mm.
And from that inflammation and those toxins, then it starts to interplay with your DNA. And that's where the genetic component comes in. Why we see certain amount of people much sicker than other people who have the same toxic load, because they have genes that are susceptible to
Mm.
toxins more than others. And then finally, that toxin interplay with the inflammation, which interplays with the genetics. Then you get your disease. I frequently keep saying on this program and other where I lecture is toxins find out where your genes are the weakest, and that's the problem you get.
Mm.
So if you have heart disease in your family, that's where toxins are going to take you out. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, that's where the toxins are going to take you out. Cancer, that's where the toxins are going. That genetic blueprint that you have is interacted by these toxins and this inflammation in such a way that it brings forth that disease pattern.
So how, and that's the thing is like we all have our different codes, right? The DNA
Right.
patterns and genes that we're born with. But we at least can see the data, right? Like there's
Right.
things genetic tests out there that some of us have taken. 23andMe, I think, is one of
Mhm.
them. But like, so how would you? Because this, I think, is a really big aha moment when I learned, like, oh, it plays with my gene. The toxins literally seek these out. So let's go deeper here.
So toxins, by their definition, they're things that are toxic to your body. That means they cause damage. It's very simple. But that damage comes in a lot of different ways. You can have toxins which cause inflammation. That's your body's response to an invader. All toxins produce that. You can have toxins that are oxidative, which means they burn things. They touch things. I mean, we've all had chemical burns. That's a toxin. And a lot of these toxins we're getting in our bodies are those type of chemicals. They're burning chemicals. For example, pesticides, herbicides. They're
Mm-hmm.
oxidative agents. They get in our body, they get on us, and they get on plants, they get on animals. Their whole purpose is to burn things to kill that organism. And they kill us too.
Mm.
We're not immune to pesticides and herbicides. Matter of fact, pesticides are what we consider to be one of our top three biggest threats.
Oof.
Now, the other things that toxins can do, they can break your DNA because oxidative force is one of the things that when you burn the DNA, it breaks. And when you break the DNA in the wrong place, you get cancer.
Oh, is that what? Oh, interesting. I was
That's
gonna
how
ask what
cancer,
happened.
yep. Cancer, the difference between a normal cell and a cancer cell is that the DNA in the normal cell got broken in a specific spot.
Mm-hmm.
That is the part that tells the cell when to die. And when you break that DNA at that specific spot and that cell no longer can access that code, that self-destruct system, it just goes on living forever. That's by definition the difference between a normal cell and a cancer cell is cancer cells, we call them immortal. They never die. That's why when they divide, they just keep piling on top of each other, which is why cancers get bigger and bigger because they don't shrink because the cells can't die. But that's all from that little break in the
Wow.
DNA that comes from the toxins. Now, toxins can also act like hormones. So they can go in and tell a cancer grow. Even though your body's trying to keep that hormone away from the cancer, it's telling it to grow. Or it can do other things. It can inhibit other things like the some of the toxins can actually tell the body to do different things as a hormone would, but it's inappropriate for what you want going on. So you want a cancer to die, and all of a sudden these other hormones are getting released because the toxin actually triggered the gland to release that hormone. So you get the right hormone just for the wrong reason.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, there exists so many different ways that these toxins interplay with the body, and they're all bad. Probably the worst thing that toxins do is they break the biochemical pathway to get the toxins out. We have
Mm-hmm.
pathways. They're called detox pathways, and the toxins break that mechanism.
Wow. I got it. Okay, so yeah, the shoot out of the body, the natural way to detox is just severed somehow.
The
Yeah,
other
by that.
thing to know about the detox pathway is our detox pathways were never built to take care of these kind of chemicals. They,
Right.
they don't know what to do with them. And so a lot of these chemicals bioaccumulate. It used to be, as I said before, 30 years ago, people say, I have mercury. And I would say, stop eating fish. Or they have the forever chemicals, PFAs, stop eating fish. Or they had mold toxins, stop eating grains. And you knew where they were coming from in general, and you knew what type of things to tell people to avoid. That doesn't exist anymore. It's every toxin. I mean, every toxin is in everything.
Yeah.
Water has every toxin. Air has every toxin. Food has every toxin. Chemicals in our house, we had tons of toxins. I mean, it doesn't play anymore, Joe. And
No.
that's one of the things people are like, well, it's a little overwhelming. So why even try?
Right. That's my
Interestingly
feeling
enough,
here when you
yeah,
say that.
but interestingly enough, because it's everywhere, it made it simpler to avoid them.
How so?
Because, because now you just have to filter all your water, filter all your air, keep all the chemicals out of the house, peel all your fruits and vegetables, and then wash everything that you eat. I mean, it just became easier because instead of me giving you a laundry list of all the things you have to avoid mercury, now it's just filtering and cleaning everything. It actually makes it easier to make your house toxic proof.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it makes logical sense to filter what you're going to ingest and however that is. And
Right.
I guess my questions go to, like how filtered do we need to go? Are we talking showers as well, all the way
Yep.
to like, so everything in the water,
So our research so far we've done over 300 patients so far. We've collected all their data and we watched them months and years out. All of the patients have done very well with getting the toxins out and keeping them out. Matter of fact, the toxins keep going lower month after month after they have the plasma exchange done because they've instituted the avoidance program.
Mhm.
And we have 8 different guidebooks that we're going to talk about that have to do with the avoidance program. One's about air, one's about water, one's about food, one's about cosmetics and consumer products, one's about the chemicals under the sink, one's about how do you treat baby. Remember, things are bad for baby. They're also bad for you because you're getting on you when you're doing it for the baby. And these are things like people like, I didn't think about toilet wipes. I mean, the flushables,
Mhm.
they just covered with chemicals. And, there's so many different ways to
Oh
just
man.
just to put a list of stop using these things, use these things instead. You
Yes.
can make your house toxic proof. And if you do that, since the house is the worst place that you're going to get toxic, it becomes easy for now that the home is the safest place for you to keep from becoming toxic.
Yeah, we will dive deep into all of those because, me with a couple little ones in the house, I know there's sponges, and I've heard about the baby wipes and all that. I'm like, wow,
Yeah. Yeah.
there've been, there's things in the news. And of course, we hear about microplastics all the time. We'll dive into that also in an upcoming episode, probably multiple. And then I think of, I'm thinking of just the last, 30, 40 years. Like I just turned 40 years old and I'm like, I feel like I've been like a guinea pig for a lot of plastics and BPA, forever, all these things. And, I think of the 50s, you said, when it started really on the industrial toxins and how it's almost accumulated almost to this point. I don't know what your take is on that, but like how it felt like a bubble almost.
You said it exactly right, Joe. You're 40.
Mhm.
You're of the toxic generation. You were born into a toxic world. Your mother consumed toxins and you were given toxins in the uterus. We talked before. I will talk again on so many times. The baby, the unborn child, is the most vulnerable of all to toxins
Mhm.
because it's developing, it's new, it's growing. And that's the worst time to put toxins into play because a billion things have to go right to make a healthy child. And the reason that we're likely seeing increased rates of ADHD, autism, spectrum disorder, obesity in children is likely a lot to do with the toxins in our universe.
It's wild, but it makes a lot of sense. There seems to be a lot of correlations there. I mean, the
Yeah,
data's here to show there's so many components now coming into our
yeah.
bodies. So, and maybe that's, I'd love to go a little bit more the tie-in now to diseases. So you're starting to talk about it with, the breaking of the genetic code, and that each of us have these predispositions in our, in our DNA that we can look up, do some research. Yeah,
Let me give you a little medical background. Now, I've been a doctor for
please.
40 years. When I became a doctor, we did not have any markers for inflammation. They didn't exist. We didn't have, I remember being in the ER and one of the interns coming up and, have you heard about this new test? What new test? It's called C-reactive protein, CRP. It's new. It shows you if inflammation is going on in the body. And you know what my response was? Who cares?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Who cares?
Wow.
Nobody had tied inflammation to disease because 40 years ago, inflammation wasn't tied to disease.
Mm-hmm.
It was much less common, much less aggressive, and affected many fewer people. It just wasn't on our radar.
Yeah. So inflammation now, though, it seems because now I think it's getting a little bit more known by the general public.
Yep.
I guess define it like now you're understanding. Like take it. You took us back, 30-ish years ago. So now with everything you've learned, like fill in those gaps.
You have to understand in the body, we need inflammation. Inflammation is our alarm system that alerts the body that you have an invader. It could be a virus, it could be a toxin, it could be an allergen, it could be a splinter. It doesn't matter. It could be cancer. The body sets off its alarms, and what that does is inflammation is heat. And so what happens is certain chemicals called cytokines in an area of the body or the entire body, they localize in the one area where the infection is or the trauma is or the whatever is in that area, and they start heating things up because that's the signal for the body to send in all the forces, all the armies, all the navies, all the air force. Everybody's going in to do battle, and that's how the body knows to take care of things, because after the battle was done and the enemy is defeated, it cools off, and then all the stem cells and exosomes come in and start repairing all the damage. And that's acute inflammation. So acute inflammation lasts for a couple of days, maybe a week. Why it fights off whatever it is that it's fighting off, but eventually it turns itself off because the enemy is gone. And then the body heals and you move on happily down your way. But for some reason, until recently, we didn't know why acute inflammation in some reasons never turned off. And now it became a five-alarm fire. And everything started exploding. The brain, the joints, the muscles, the gut, everything was on fire. And it never shut itself off. It was like stuck on the on switch. And everybody's like, why is this switch stuck on? What's pushing the button?
Yeah.
And people looked and they looked and they looked. I don't think until recently we started understanding it's all the toxins. That's what's pushing the buttons. And once you get enough toxins and you get this other insult and this acute inflammation starts, the gook is just like a car. All this gook has accumulated through all the gears, and now the button's stuck and it won't pop back out. And it's stuck on the on position and it just doesn't turn off. And now you have this heat and this damage starting to destroy tissues because the tissues are dying from all the heat and all the inflammation. And that when you start, and then the cells start breaking up and the DNA starts altering, and then you get all these other manifestations of inflammation, which is, you've heard the term inflammation now, you've heard the term chronic inflammation now, and now you get chronic inflammatory disease. It's a progression. You get inflammation, acute inflammation, never turns off, becomes chronic inflammation. When chronic inflammation has been around long enough time, it's damaging the tissues, and that means you start getting a disease because the tissues in certain areas of the body are damaged.
Got it.
So this is a spectrum, and we've been seeing that more and more in medicine. I've watched that body of literature grow to the point that every doctor, researcher knows inflammation, especially let's specifically talk chronic inflammation, is the cause of every disease over 40 that takes us out. Every disease.
Wow. And now and you believe it's pretty well known now that all MDs, doctors treating illnesses know this, this inflammation now.
They know that. They know that.
That's
What they don't know yet is what's pushing the button and keeping the button on stuck on the on. They still debate, and it's interesting because you always hear the same thing: lifestyle, environmental factors. They know it's lifestyle and environmental factors, but what they haven't said is it's the toxins.
Yeah.
And I'm saying here, it's the toxins.
Yeah.
It's very simple. Because never before in medicine have we been able to come up with a procedure that gets all the toxins out. But once you get all the toxins out, guess what happens to the inflammation?
It should go down to zero. The army should go away, right?
It turns off. It finally turns off. We've done hundreds of patients, and all their inflammatory markers come down.
Wow.
Almost to nominal levels.
So how do you, I know there's a toxin test, and that's something you do all the time. I have taken one. So that gives the data, like the initial data.
That gives you the data on what toxins you have.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, the next question is, how badly am I being affected by those toxins? Then you need to do blood tests. And what we're looking for is inflammatory markers, lab tests that measure inflammation, things like CRP, sedimentation rate. There's a lot of different inflammatory markers. We can look at the immune system on how the immune system is acting. Is it revved up? Is it revved down? And then we can also look at oxidative markers. How much of your tissue is on fire? And we can look at things like myeloperoxidase, oxidated LDL. We can look at what another enzyme called TMAO, and we can see these enzymes, if they're really active, they're active because they're out there trying to reduce all these free radicals that are caused by oxidative. Because when you burn something, you give off these electrons, they're called free radicals. And then you have to have an enzyme in your body that's capturing those and converting them back into something less dangerous. So we can measure these enzymes when they're very high. We know you have a lot of oxidative stress. So First, there comes the toxins. And then if you have the inflammation, what do you think the next thing I'm looking at is?
Oh, you want to see how chronic it is, right? And
I'm looking at your genes.
okay, where are
I'm
those?
looking at family history and I'm looking at your genes because if you got bad detox pathway genes and you got a lot of toxins and inflammation starting, you're in a lot more trouble
Yep,
than someone who has toxins and inflammation but has good genes because you can manage it better.
got it.
So
So
those patients are they're about 10% of patients, and they're at extremely high risk because this little bit could cause them a great deal of problems.
mm-hmm.
So you don't necessarily have to do a genetic test to determine this. If you know a good family history, you can look at your family history and do a good family history. What diseases run in my family?
Got it.
And that's really
Okay.
what you're looking for on the genetic test. The other thing the genetic tests do give us is the ability to classify whether you're a good detoxer or a bad detoxer. Genes like COMT, genes like MTHFR, what's called the motherfucker gene. Sorry, but that's what everybody calls it in the internet. These are, and then there's NAD and SOT, and there's all these other genes that help you get rid of all these toxins. And if you don't have good, strong enzymes, which is what the genes code for, to get rid of the toxins, you have the bad genes that don't work very good, you're in trouble.
Okay.
Even if
Where?
you don't have a disease yet, but you have
Because there's a
bad genes
blockage
and a
there.
lot of toxins, yeah, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You're going to be one of these people that are going to get sicker sooner. So we
Mm-hmm.
can start, but even with the patients we've had so far, we can start making predictions of to what degree is someone's going to get sick or to what degree is someone going to get better when we use plasma change.
That's a good point. It's the other flip side. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
once we clear these out, how well can your body function
correct.
with now the armies, the navies, Air Force are all gone. They're resting, they're
Right.
chilling
And
out.
they're all gone on break. They're all calmed down and they all landed and they've all gone on leave and they've all gone home to their family. And for the first time in possibly decades, these people body is getting a sigh of relief.
Do you think this is, I mean, you've already said before, the trends are they're trending upward across the board and not stopping. Now, I mean, it seems like there's more awareness, and this is
Yeah,
partially it is why we have this podcast here
right.
to talk about not only what you could do about it, but really like just what's happening. Back to awareness. Um, I don't know. Do you feel like there's a subset of people that should focus a little bit more than like I said, I'm
Yes.
40, and yeah,
Yeah. No, there's absolutely two subsets of people that you have to be incredibly worried about. Number one, the unborn child. I already told you they're the most susceptible of everybody, which is why I'm 62, you're 40, you're in more danger than I am because I developed before the toxins were in the environment.
right.
You did not. 30-year-olds, even less so. 20-year-old, even less so. A newborn, they're born into this environment that has hundreds of thousands of dangerous toxins already in it, coming through the mom to the baby. We can measure these toxins in the umbilical cord. We can measure microplastics in the first stool of the baby. We can measure toxins in the baby's first urine. So these things are known that the baby has them. And then we sit there and go, wonder why autism keeps creeping up more and more over the decades. Second client you have to be really worried about. Women over 60 with low body weight who use beauty products and have done a DNA test to find out they have bad clearance, bad genes. If you're this 5, go get your gene test done. Because from our data, and we've done thousands of testing already, most people who are healthy out of 100 toxins measure about 12 to 13 per person. And those are above the 75 percentile range in NHANES. So that's the average amount of person. I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying that can be dangerous for a lot of those people. But then there's this other group that's up in the 40s. Now, mind you, we got this group around 12 or 13, and then there's a long pause, and then there's this other little group around 40, and they're all women,
Wow.
low birth, who have low weight. Because first off, women don't detox as well as men do.
Is
It's
that
just
just a natural thing? Just
it's a gene
structure.
thing. It's a gene thing. Number two, the women who have lower body weight means you don't have that many fat cells. You don't have many places to hide the toxins. Your body wants to hide them. It's called sequestering. They put it inside proteins. They put them inside fat cells. They'll put it inside bone. They'll put it anywhere it can to try to get it out of the way. But then women don't have a lot of fat cells. There's just no place to hide. women who've used a lot of beauty products. Consumer products, beauty products are the number one cause of toxins in women and many men. Because you're taking these highly toxic chemicals, you're putting them directly on your skin,
Mhm.
and they're getting absorbed immediately. And you do that day in and day out for 40 years. And these chemicals bioaccumulate. That means at some point, they don't leave your body. They just continue to build up and build up and build up.
Wow. Yeah, and this is so. I mean, that's I think very clear as day. Any moms out there or soon to be moms. I
Yeah.
mean, watch what your environment looks like, what you're consuming in general, and then of course, a woman of that
I
all
would
the.
love to see every woman who's thinking about having a child go to the mdlifespan.com website under guidebooks and download them all. They're free.
Mhm.
And look through it and say, how much of this stuff can I do in my house a year before I want to get pregnant?
Mm.
Number two, order a toxin test from any integrative doctor. There's many companies out there you can purchase it from directly. You can purchase it off our website, and that comes with one of our doctors going through that test with you as well, because you don't know what you can't measure.
Absolutely.
So those are the two things I tell the mom wannabes, the moms that, because it is obvious, not proven yet, but obvious to every pediatric genetic doctor that the spectrum disorders are from the toxins.
Mhm. I mean, why
Again,
wouldn't they be? Like, there's
the toxins are all neurotoxins. They destroy brain cells, and you're giving it to a child whose brain is developing, and then they turn into autistic or spectrum disorder. And we're like, what happened? And look at the past. Back in 1960, it was 1 in every 2,500 babies born with autism. Now it's 1 in 33.
Jeez. Yeah.
What changed between 1960 and today?
And we lined it out here. Yeah. We lined out. Oh man. Okay. Well, you know what? What I want to do is, maybe this would be, we covered a lot here. I think it's a lot for us to think about. You listening, watching, definitely get the guidebooks. Go check out mdlifespan.com because you have a ton of resources on there. That's where I learned a lot. And thank you for offering that too. In terms of genetics, I think that's the one loop in my brain. Is there any sort of place that you would recommend people to go for that?
Well, there's a lot of genetic tests out there that do a very
For
good
sure.
job. I mean, there's 23andMe, there's IntelliZ, there's just so many good DNA testing out there. But you want to get the DNA tests that focus on detox pathways. And there are some specific companies out there. If you just Google DNA test for um, detox pathways. A number of different companies come up. They're not terribly expensive. They usually do the swab. You send it in, and they will come back. And if you start lighting up with all these different genetic problems, so these genetic alleles, as they're called, that are not matching up to be the strongest ones you have. Again, back to go get your toxins tested and go get your house clean because you're at risk more than others.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Well, do your homework, y'all. Keep going, and then we'll have follow-up episodes where we go deeper on some of these topics. I know we'll be going back to some of these foundational. I mean, because it's wild. The trends right now, and we're learning more and more every day. So we'll keep discussing here. Dr. Savage, thank you, my man.
Thanks, Joe.